Dun, 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 somebody save me. I don't care how you do it, just save me. Aloha, nerds, and welcome back to the Salawag's Why It's Great Gut Reaction, where I watch things and react from the gut. Alright, first off, I gotta recommend to you Talkville. If you have not been watching Talkville and you're a Smallville fan and you want to know stuff about that happened behind the scenes on Smallville, Talkville, you gotta watch. Talkville, hosted by Michael Rosenbaum, who played Lex Luthor, and Tom Welling, who played Clark Kent, Superman himself. I loved Smallville. It came out in 2001. I was in, 8th grade, 9th grade when it came out. It's one of those landmark shows that was just, if you're a Superman fan, especially the first 3 to 7 seasons of Smallville, it's just fantastic world building. And it comes out at the same time as the Dark Knight trilogy was coming out. Smallville was 2001. Dark Knight, starting with Batman Begins, was 2005. So in this period, Warner Brothers is having a fantastic time getting the origins of its tentpole DC characters, Superman and Batman. And both origin stories are fantastic, and both do a great job of building up the why of the character. Why is the character the character? What gives them the internal parts that makes them the hero that you know them to be? And Smallville, it all hinges on the parental relationships. What I love about Talkville is that Michael Rosenbaum and Tom Welling are reacting to every single episode of Smallville, starting from the pilot. And they're giving their insights on their experiences making the show, which is awesome. I've literally wanted this for 20 years. I've wanted this podcast since the first episode came out. Just like, tell me more. What about behind the scenes? I remember getting the DVDs and there weren't that many special features. And I was like, I want more commentaries. Now, again, the show also came out at the height of DVD, when DVD was selling itself on all the bonus material you could get and learning about how to make movies. Very influential time for me in terms of wanting to know how movies worked and shows worked, and what exactly does the filmmaker do that makes the product, the film or the show, so emotionally effective. And in the case of Batman Begins, a plethora of bonus features to tell you what's going on. But for Smallville, not that many features, not that many commentaries. And I just wanted more commentaries. At the time, I was like, I want to know from the actors and from the crew what the hell was going on. So Talkville is like, thank you. I've literally been waiting for this for 20 years. The last episode they just reviewed Jitters. And they bring on the creators of Smallville, Al Millar and Michael Goff, or is it Goff, Millar, and Al Michael? Damn, I'm really bad at this. It says it on the title. Let me put it up. Al Goff and Miles Millar. There we go. All right. I'm not going to edit that to seem like I knew what I was talking about. Anyway, they bring the creators of Smallville onto the show, and they talk to them for about 20-25 minutes, which was so awesome. I wish they brought them on for the pilot. That would have been amazing. I hope they come back for the finale. It's just awesome hearing their behind-the-scenes information and about the struggles of making the show, going through so many different directors, things like that. And getting the actors' honest opinions on the episodes, because there's so many episodes of Smallville that are just so, like, okay, freak of the week, and done. And they acknowledge that. But that was a different time of storytelling. That was when TV shows had to be 22 episodes at least. to be getting the audience in and to make sure you were having a following, because the tracking just wasn't that strong back then. Now with the internet, everything is tracked up the ass, so you can figure out anything at any time, at what point people got bored, at what point people checked out. And they can tell from the audience reaction, how many reviews were there, how many people are actually talking about it, how much of it was actually positive. They can actually get a live reaction about whether people liked it or not and why. And without even having to put out a survey, we'll just tell you why, because we're sick of your little focus groups and all the bullshit, because we don't know who the hell is fucking judging this shit. But again, I really love the honesty of Welling and Rosenbaum, and it's so funny because Michael Rosenbaum, I'm a big Kind of Funny fan. I've kind of not been watching their stuff because Kind of Funny broke me into the world of podcasting. First it was Black Nerd, then Comic Book Girl 19, and then I just got way obsessed with Kind of Funny. But one day Michael Rosenbaum shows up on Kind of Funny, and he's like, I want to know what you do. And they're like, we want to know what you do. And they're both like fascinated about each other. Michael Rosenbaum's like, how do you do this podcasting thing? Because he wanted to get into it. And here he is just killing it. I think, Inside of You is his first podcast, his baby. And it's pretty damn good. I think he starts off very good. Maybe a little bit nervous, but definitely now, like so many episodes in, Michael Rosenbaum is such a great host of his own show, and he has carried that into Talkville. And Welling, who is such a great like partner to Rosenbaum, I had no idea that they had such a strong friendship, because I don't know. I'm watching the show and I'm hoping that would be the case, but I don't know. When the show ends and they're not in anything again, I'm like, oh well. Not that, friendship means you have to work together again, but it's nice when that happens. But certainly when it doesn't happen again, you're like, oh, well, come on. Like, how do you not pair these two up again just for the hell of it? But the fact that, to find out that, in fact, they had stayed in touch, they had become friends, matching what their characters were on the show, that they were deep friends who just had so much going on. They went through so much on the show together that bonded them and made them respect each other. I love getting all of those perspectives out of Talkville. So I just wanted to upfront tell you to go watch Talkville if you're not watching Talkville and you're a Smallville fan and you want to know the behind the scenes, you got all those questions, go, now's the time. They'll probably give you some answers that you're not even expecting. And I just, it was great seeing Al and Miles talk about the making of the show in this past episodes where they review Jitters, which features Candyman Tony Todd. I do remember Jitters being one of my favorite episodes of season 1. It was definitely one I watched a lot in the beginning. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Smallville as well, but I just wanted to upfront tell you how good Talkville is. It reminds me of Kind of Funny's In Review, but it's an in review done by the people who made it, which, in all honesty, is what I want. Like, I love podcasters. There's so many great ones out there with different life points of view. What got me into Kind of Funny was that they had all these personal stories to tell that were so interesting and so intricate, and how they all tied together. It was a show of its own, learning about these people. I highly recommend, especially the Game Over Greggy, before they officially became Kind of Funny, where they're just being straight up raw. You get a lot about their lives and all these interesting stories, and they then branched out and did so many great things. The Kind of Funny animated series was so fantastic, but they really broke me into the podcast world and watching more podcasts. What I've always wanted as someone who loves movies and loves shows, but also I really like to know what the filmmaker was thinking. Like, that's what I like to know. A lot of gripes I have with a lot of movie reviewers is that they don't bother even, when they're reviewing movies that are so many years old that they don't bother watching the commentaries or watching interviews or reading interviews. They'll just say their opinion, and everyone in the comments will agree with them, and it's clearly either it's a shared opinion or an opinion that's been pushed upon them that they now agree with. And this sort of mass thinking occurs, and all I can sit there and say is, like, the filmmaker had a perspective on this that because you didn't look it up, you have now influenced 100 people, 1,000 people, thousands of people. You've now influenced all these people into thinking what you think, and now the filmmaker's either going to catch flack, or people are going to think down on the filmmaker because that's what you thought and you said it in a convincing way. And now the filmmaker just kind of has to sit there and take it. And granted, that is the cost of putting yourself out there, that you might just have to sit there and take it for something you did. But if people are judging you based on their own opinions, then they're not even judging you on what you did. And that's what I hate. And so what I love about Talkville is it's the opportunity to hear it from the horse's mouth. I would rather hear why Al and Miles made certain choices. I would rather hear why Michael and Tom made certain choices, because as far as I'm concerned, Michael Rosenbaum is the untouchable best Lex Luthor performance we've ever had. I don't even care that he's not full-blown Lex Luthor by the end of the show. All the seeds of what make Lex Luthor who he is are in the show from the first episode. That he is that character, regardless of being the full form of it. He is that character. He imbues it so well. And one of the things I like that Michael brings up is that he was surprised at his own casting when he saw some of the other heavy hitters that were up for his own role. And yet, one of the best comments from the creators when Michael would say he would get like a script and a scene, he would be like, I mean, how am I'm going to come off really evil. And then they would say, no, we know you're going to play against that. So that's why we wrote that way. Because the creators saw that Michael had this ability to play things with a charm and with more conflict and a lot more going on, because they saw that ability in him and saw what he was doing with the character. They would just be much more bold, and they would write these things, and they would know that one of the worst things you can do if you're directing a scene and it's written a certain way is to just direct it the way it appears to be written on the script. When I went to film school, this is one of the first things they had to pound out of your head. I went to Academy of Art University. I had excellent teachers who were professionals in the film industry. And that's one of the first lessons that had to be broken. Like, don't read it the way it appears to be written. It appears to be written as evil or sinister. But you have to find the character within it. That would someone really say this in an evil, sinister way? Would they really think of themselves as evil? You have to read between the lines. And sometimes you have to play the scene completely opposite of how it is said. And that doesn't just apply to acting and performing, or that applies to directing. That applies to music. Sometimes you can get a great scene that's great because the music is completely opposite to what's going on in the scene. But it's all about finding that line, the hidden, invisible aspect that actually makes it work. And the fact that Michael had that he did have a charm about him, where he did seem to be this very likable, kind guy, but always had this kind of hidden thing within him that was both driving him and making him make certain choices. And in the case of Lex Luthor's past, like, I don't know. Again, here we go. I was not a heavy reader of comic books growing up. And the only Superman comics I have read are The Death of Superman and For the Man Who Has Everything. And, Superman's appearance in The Dark Knight Returns, which fucking all of those are amazing. So I have a very high standard of what I want to read when I read Superman, and that's kind of it. And then there was that Superman Returns prequel comic, but somehow better than the movie and worse. Eh, sorry, Bryan Singer, and sorry to people who didn't like Superman Returns who don't want to hear that name right now. Sorry. I'm apologizing for the offensive things I have just said. I am better than those who don't apologize for things they just do. Speak truth all the time. But anyway, fantastic Lex Luthor. Although I will say, hats off to Kevin Spacey for his portrayal of Lex Luthor. I would say that is second best to Michael Rosenbaum's, because I did think he did a fantastic bridge between what Gene Hackman did in the 70s with the original Superman movie with Christopher Reeve and what Michael Rosenbaum did. He did a fantastic bridge between those two characters. But ultimately, again, the writing didn't give him what I feel he deserved, even though I think he had some excellent dialogue. But in the case of Smallville, circling back, Smallville's about Superman. It's about the early days of what made Superman who he is. And I think Tom Welling, what I love about Tom Welling telling his side of the story is that he, and spoiler alert for the podcast, because you should really just watch Talkville and stop listening to me now. Just go watch Talkville. Who even gives a shit what I have to say after this point? But anyway, if you're still listening, what I love that Tom Welling said in the very first episode, that when they were talking about the pilot, is that essentially Smallville was his second acting job. He had done some work on Chasing Amy. I think it was like a couple episodes or something like that. But he really didn't know the craft yet. And so he was just very honest in saying when he came to Smallville, he was like, I'm a baby. I don't know how it goes. I don't know what I'm supposed to do or not do. And one of the things I like is that he said when he met Michael Rosenbaum, he felt like he was meeting a real actor, and he just had someone to sort of bounce off of who could help make him better and just know how to do it right. But what I do want to say, that I'm sure Michael Rosenbaum has either said or felt at some point, I think he does mention it a few times in the podcast, the fact that Tom Welling was coming in like that is what made him great as a Clark Kent, because that is what Clark Kent is. That Tom Welling just brought his honest experience into that character. And I feel that, hearing all of this, I now do see his performances differently. But at the same time, I actually think even higher of him. I'm like, you know what? You did what you're supposed to do. Which is like, you found that place of honesty that came out of you. And later on, he did learn the acting tricks and how to do all these things. He did pick it up. Now I can see where he became a finer actor. But all that raw stuff that comes out of him in those first few episodes, I think that's so strong because he was right for the role. He had what it needed, and he brought it out. I feel a much higher respect for him as a performer because he brought it, and so much more respect for their relationship, between Tom Welling and Michael Rosenbaum throughout the show, because they had a genuine. What was happening with the characters was also what was happening with the actors. Is that here you have this older, more experienced guy trying to guide the younger guy, but at the same time, their cross values and the things that the other person doesn't have helps make both better. And that was very much the strength of the show, is that we're seeing this tug of war between two people who have something that the other person doesn't have, and both are making each other better throughout the show. And the struggle of the show is really, the first episode of Smallville, Lex Luthor hits Clark Kent with his car, and they both go off of a bridge into the lake below, and Clark saves him. So 10 years before Man of Steel did it, Smallville did it first, and Smallville did it better. But Man of Steel did do it with much superior cinematography. But that's Zack Snyder's fault. He's just too good. But that was such an amazing moment. And so seeing that as their start, of Clark saving Lex from the busted car at the bottom of the lake under a bridge where he's passed out is how they start. But also, that's the physical save. But Clark spends so much of the show trying to keep Lex from going to his darker, more scheming inclinations, which we see come a lot from the father, Lionel Luthor, played by John Glover, who just fucking killed it. Where there was a commenter who said something that I feel when I watch John Glover, and I saw it on his Instagram, where he said, there's so many times where you can never fully tell how much Lionel Luthor cares and how much he's just a scheming evil bastard. The way the commenter said it was much better than what I said, but it was just so true. I think John Glover brings another level, but also again, it's part of that tug of war where you have the devil on one side and you have the angel on one side, and the show is just as much about Clark's shaping into the earnest person he's going to become, as much as it's about trying to save the soul of Lex Luthor before he can become the evil, sinister thing that he will become. So I really appreciate that the actors give a lot of insight into, literally episode by episode, how this develops and their perspectives. And sometimes they don't remember things, and that's fine. But the fact that they're trying to, and the fact that they do remember certain things, like what I love about Jitters is one of my favorite Clark Kent saves in the entire series is the Jitters finale, when the bridge there, we have Tony Todd playing this victim with jitters. Like, he was working as, I forget, was he a janitor or was he a general worker in the LexCorp labs, and he was in the middle of an explosion that shot meteor rocks, because the show starts off with a huge meteor shower that hit Smallville and infected a lot of the residents with superpowers and all this sort of thing. But not only that, but Lionel Luthor, based on this episode, figured out very early on that the kryptonite rocks have special properties that affect things differently. And he was running this whole underground lab underneath the fertilizer facility that Lex Luthor is in charge of during the show. This happens, I guess, prior to the show starting. And in this lab, they were experimenting with the meteor rocks, trying to grow plants faster, trying to create a new kind of crop. And unfortunately, it ends with a huge explosion that infects Tony Todd's character. You know, literally little meteor rocks are embedded in his flesh, and his flesh is trying to push them out, and the meteor rocks are trying to kind of stay there. There's this weird problem happening in his skin, and it causes him to have these violent seizures, and these seizures that are more powerful than just a basic seizure. When he has a seizure and hits someone, they fly. So he has like a hidden super strength, but it's activated, unfortunately, by his seizures. And in a messed up way, Tony Todd's character, unlike many of the actual villains of the show, he's like halfway through a transformation. He clearly would have been a super strong person if this transformation had happened in a bit more of an amicable way to his body, but unfortunately it was blasted meteor rocks into his flesh, and that was the consequence. So he's one of the sad victims of the meteor rocks that appear in the show. But anyway, he's trying to prove that this hidden plant exists underneath the plant, and they're on this bridge, and the bridge breaks because of his jitters, and Clark Kent holds both Tony Todd and Lex Luthor and lifts them both up onto the bridge, while also resisting the effects of the meteor rocks, which set up across the show caused Clark to get sick and incredibly weak. So this is one of his first instances where Clark is resisting the weakness caused by the kryptonite, proving his strength, not just his literal physical strength, but his strength of character to just push through the pain. Because that's part of what makes the character of Man of Steel, that he will push through any suffering to do the right thing and to save lives. And that's part of his essential part of his character. Jitters is one of the essential episodes that sets up that aspect of his character. And as they talk about in the Talkville episode, this is one of those mythology building episodes that's part of the mythology of building up who Clark Kent is and who Lex Luthor is. Because Lex Luthor, up to this point in the show, has been very friendly, he's been very kind. He tries to be very kind to the Kent family. But unfortunately, he's also discovering some of the hidden works of his father, who's up to no good. And it's both a concern, will he turn out like his father, but also what are the long-term consequences of what his father is keeping from him. And on the flip side, what I appreciate Talkville talks about is the strength of Smallville is the relationship of the parents. The creators literally talk about this because it's always in my mind when I think about why Smallville is great. But the creators on this episode talk about how the strength of the show is that it's about actual parents being parents, not being absent so that we could just have adventures nonstop, and not acting like kids so that it can be entertaining. But the strength of the show is actually the Kent parents, Ma and Pa Kent, who shape this goodwill out of Clark Kent. And I like that in the pilot and in the Talkville review of the pilot, one of the best moments for Clark is that after saving Lex, that Lex tries to give Clark the gift of a truck. And in the episode, Jonathan Kent tells Clark to give that truck back. And his reason is that Lionel Luthor had made a deal with their neighbors, their neighboring farm, to take their land. And that deal ultimately, that deal was sweetened with gifts, flashy gifts. But ultimately, Lionel Luthor went back on his word and totally screwed over their neighbors, who happened to be the parents of the family of Pete, Clark's best friend. So we have this very complicated relationship being explained, and then Clark responds with, so you're saying that so you're being angry at Lex for what his father did? And Jonathan says, no, you need to know where the money came from that bought that truck. And so there's this very honest, earnest point of view coming out of Jonathan Kent, that Jonathan Kent could not be further away from Lionel Luthor. That for Jonathan Kent, the truth and honesty and earnesty and doing good things for no other reason. He doesn't say, don't save this guy and expect gifts or want gifts or even accept gifts because they're grateful. You saved his life. That's enough. That's special. We're proud of you for that. That's all you need to do. And that kind of core value is one of the essential values of Superman himself. You understand? That Superman saves people and asks for nothing in return. That is what a hero is. Forget superhero. That is what a hero is. He just saves them because it's the right thing to do in that moment. And Jonathan Kent is trying to iron that quality into Superman. You know, he's trying to mold that into him. Like, don't... And again, with someone who has these powers, it would be very easy for him to abuse them for any which reason. But another line I want to talk about Jonathan Kent a bit more. My personal relationship to Superman comes from the 90s animated series, where I believe Superman was voiced by Tim Daly, and furthermore, the Justice League cartoon, which actually has Michael Rosenbaum as the Flash. Fantastic Flash. I think still probably the best Flash. So Michael Rosenbaum is the best Lex Luthor and the best Flash. I know Grant Gustin's freaking fantastic, but Michael Rosenbaum is the best Flash. Come on. I mean, his voice just fits that character so freaking well. And that's kind of the standard I set when I'm watching this stuff. But he's also a different Flash from Grant Gustin, so yeah, that's one thing. He's Wally West. But that being said, my relationship to Superman starts with those cartoons and really with Smallville. Because although we do get some origin episodes out of the Superman cartoon, Smallville fleshes them out in live action and stays away from the suit and stays away from many of the big villains, which I appreciate. We get a lot of precursor villains, which is like, well, no wonder you can defeat them as Superman later because you already dealt with them in Smallville. That's a little questionable. But anyway, it really hammers home the value of Clark's parents and what that their nurturing made Clark who he is. And so how I view Superman is shaped strongly by Smallville. And I think a lot of people growing up in my time, that is what they were shaped by. Yeah, I mean, yes, we did see Superman starring Christopher Reeve, and we watched all that stuff because we love that character. But our point of view on this character and on the character of Lex Luthor comes from Smallville and how well it's done. The core idea is fantastic and the delivery is perfect. One of my favorite lines that Jonathan Kent says is in episode 3 of season 1, where Clark is worried about his powers and he's worried about his value to other people. And he's worried about all these things that teenagers would already be worried about, but applied to a large scope because of his superpowers. And Jonathan Kent stops him and says, "I am happy when you wake up in the morning." And that single line is so powerful and so important to have a parent say that to a child. And there's a lot of parents out there who maybe they do work hard to provide for their kids, but maybe they don't talk like that. And I definitely, my own father was very loving and always providing, but he didn't talk like that. He wasn't, he was a good father, but he wasn't like that. You know what I mean? He didn't express himself like that. Now I'm an adult. We relate a lot better, and we say much very kind things to each other now. But certainly when I was growing up, it wasn't like that. But he would always be there. He would exemplify what Jonathan Kent talked about, but he wouldn't say the words. Those words would be unspoken, but they would be performed by his duties, by always being there when I needed him. And so I relate to that. But Jonathan Kent putting his hand on Clark's shoulder and telling him those words are, to me, the critical source of what makes Superman Superman. Because when I hear that line, I see Superman floating above the earth and seeing the sun rise. And looking upon a world of people that wake up happy to be alive. That every time he saves someone, he is just happy that those people woke up in the morning. That to me is what Superman is about. He is the spirit of saviors, and he is the spirit of being a savior who asks for nothing in return. That in fact, the fact that you're alive, and the fact that you're well, and the fact that you wake up in the morning is enough for him to feel good. That's all he needs. That he has the power to be abusive and do whatever he wants and all that stuff. And one of my favorite episodes, now I'm just talking about Smallville. So, to cap it with Talkville, go check that out. It's a great podcast. And I'd say even if you haven't seen Smallville, you might still get something out of it. But it's really for the fans of Smallville. If you're a fan of Talkville, go check it out. If you want to keep hearing me ramble about Superman, I'm going to ramble a little bit more. Another episode that stands out for me, because I watched a whole bunch of episodes of Smallville. I watched my favorite episodes of Smallville season 1. One of my other favorites was Leech, which is about Shawn Ashmore, an X-Man, Iceman. He's kind of a suicidal, sad kid, and he's kind of about to jump off a dam. There's a dam in Smallville also. He's kind of about to jump off a dam. He's listening to a sad song from Staind that I love, and Tom and Mike will talk about this a lot. The fantastic soundtrack from Smallville, very much my generation, but hey, that's why it works for me. Shawn Ashmore's character is about to take a dive off of a dam, essentially killing himself. And this is one of Clark's saves. Clark super speeds over to him, catches him just before he falls, but Shawn Ashmore is holding a meteor rock. Clark Kent is holding him, and a lightning bolt strikes into Clark Kent's chest. And a charge transfers between the two of them, and Clark's powers go into Shawn Ashmore's character, and Clark becomes a normal person. No more powers. And it's a great episode for Clark because he is getting to experience being normal. He gets nosebleeds. He gets tired after gym class. All of these things he never experienced before are hitting him. But he's enjoying it. He's really enjoying the human process. But it becomes terrible because Shawn Ashmore, we find out, has a very abusive father. He goes home. He's having breakfast with his parents. The mom barely talks to him. The dad is about to hit him because he doesn't want to get up and get in his car right away. And just the fact that the dad is about to hit him over that tells you what their relationship is. But when the dad takes a swing at Shawn Ashmore catches it. So we avoid domestic abuse because of superpowers, but we're still talking about domestic abuse, which is the function of superhero stories. Not to literally talk about domestic abuse, but to talk about real issues, to confront them in a way that is safe for the younger audience, but still talking about the issue. And the issue of Leech is essentially domestic abuse and parental abuse and neglect, that the mother is very neglectful and does not look out for or protect the son, tries to in sort of passive aggressive ways, but really doesn't look out for him. And this turns Shawn Ashmore into a very petty, very selfish person, where he starts stealing things and breaking things, and he gets in a fight with a bully that picks on him when he had no powers, and he throws the bully around, and he even knocks Clark, 30 feet away onto a truck. And he caused so much destruction because ultimately, at the end of the day, he had nowhere to turn to have someone just care about him. That even the girl he likes, who gave him little looks every now and then, was freaked out when he threw her boyfriend into a truck and called him a freak. And then he's really depressed because he just has nowhere to go. And the only guy who's nice to him is Clark Kent, who saved his life. But even him, he just feels no value in it. Because when he goes back to his parents, his dad is terrified and is holding up a golf club and is literally willing to attack his son again, domestic abuse, but because he's afraid of him. And not only that, the reason he's afraid is because he had called some professors and was trying to have Shawn Ashmore studied by scientists. And all of these things are what Jonathan Kent and Martha Kent were afraid of. Because they know how people are, they know how people react, they know what people want to do, and they did not want Clark Kent to experience any of that. They themselves, and I think this is in the comics, but it's definitely in the Christopher Reeve movie, and it's definitely in the pilot of Smallville, their issue is that Martha and Jonathan could not produce a child. For whatever the reason is, they could not produce a child. And so they always wanted one of their own. And they ended up adopting. So in a way, it's like a nice adoption story. But because they wanted it so badly, they wanted to be parents, is the most important thing. They wanted to be parents, and they wanted to be good parents. And they were genuinely good people. Earnest people that people always could rely on. Jonathan Kent is the kind of guy who probably looked out for a lot of people in his community, and that's why people have a certain respect for him. They see that he's always consistent. When he says he's going to do something, he does it. When he says he's going to help you, he helps you. That's the kind of guy he is. And Martha Kent, called an uncomplicated flower by a jealous spell who did not get Jonathan Kent's love or ring, Martha Kent is just a very kind, earnest, good woman. And the two of them as a couple are just the best of the best because they have just a good spirit about them. And their parenting is knowing that people are like this. They're not oblivious to how the world is, and they don't want Clark to be oblivious either. They just want him to grow up understanding there's consequences to the things you do. And it's important that you have self-control and self-respect, but also have really good values, especially because of your abilities. You need to understand the importance of having very good values and controlling yourself, and also valuing other people. And this gives Clark a certain sense of character. He wants to be like the other kids, but he knows he can't. He knows he has to have some kind of self-control. And I really appreciate that Jonathan Kent, in particular, but also Martha Kent, represent what good parenting should look like. How it should be both stern, giving you good values and good ways to be yourself, but also it should be kind and compassionate and give you a sense of love, what love is supposed to be. And not everyone gets this, and not everyone gets that lesson. And I think I definitely lucked out, because I had parents that, even though, yeah, my dad didn't express like that, my mom did. And my mom had, they together somewhere in there, they did have the Ma and Pa Kent values, even though there was rough patches growing up, and certainly rough times that I'm not going to get into on this podcast, at least. My parents had similar things about them, where they grew up in rougher households, really rough households, that they did not want to re-experience, either doing it or have kids who had to experience that. And so it was their personal mission to make sure that their kids grew up loved and taken care of. And they did it. And I will always appreciate that. And so on that level, I relate to Clark Kent, because I feel like a little Clark Kent myself. I feel like, wow, I know that my parents love me, but I know a lot of people, and unfortunately, I know some people who, when the parents talk to me, express this enormous love, but when they talk to their kids, they're a little rougher around the edges. You see their approach to parenting is a little more scared. It's a little more just, they're not quite being the Ma and Pa Kent. And so some of my friends have been jealous, but also, hey, you didn't see the rough times either. You didn't see why our values are so strong. But I think the beauty of Smallville is getting to see why those values are so strong, and it comes out of things like, don't save people for gifts, and I'm happy when you wake up in the morning. That those values and core emotional aspects, to me, come from the parents, from the Earth parents. That is what makes Superman Superman. His powers and his knowledge of self come from his space parents, but who he is and why he does things the way that he does things, the compassion, the concern, the earnestness, that comes from his earthly parents who had the true values of what people should be. And unfortunately, too many people are not like that. He's not just super in the sense of being powerful, but he's super in the sense of having a morality that is unbreakable, that he will never allow to crack. Batman is famous for the same quality, but he's a human being. But he's the darker side. He's the human being who cannot pull himself from the darkness, because in his case, the parents are not with us anymore. But Clark gets to have the beauty of sort of having both. And it is the man who has everything. So I really appreciate Smallville for presenting such a clear sense of just the human story. How should one lead their life? It's okay to have happiness. It's okay to pursue things that you want to do, but you got to do it right, and you got to do it earnestly. That this is the way we should live. And not in the case of universal writing, they're not tied to any particular religion. There are a lot of angels throughout the show. It's very symbolic, but it never is the Kent family tied to a particular religion. This allows the story to be universal for everyone, because a lot of religions do have similar underlying values that would tie into this, even if not all the aspects are the same. The Muslim religion, for instance, does have a huge aspect about it that's about peace. People have this mixed reaction to Muslims because of terrorist attacks and all that, but more of the world is Muslim than you would believe, and I have Muslim friends, and they always talk. Our religion is about peace. It's not about violence. Like, we don't even know why these people are doing what they're doing. Very much in the way like Christians say they're about peace, but you know, there's a lot of complicated things that's gone on with people who have been led by religion or whatever. But the reason that these characters are universal is that so it could speak to the best aspects of everybody on the planet. Because ultimately, we can all agree, no matter where we go, whether you are in San Francisco, New York, or Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, when you meet people who are kind to you and good to you for no other reason, for no ulterior motive, you find a home. Is that not true? But every time you find someone who has a motive and who uses you and takes advantage of you, that is not a home. That's someone you want to get away from. Is that not true? And that is what this show is about. Because Lionel Luthor is always taking advantage. He's always getting the upper hand. And Clark Kent is trying to stop Lex from turning out like that. Unfortunately, he has his own secret to keep from Lex that kind of propels Lex even further into that direction, because Clark never really trusts him. And because Lex cannot accept having love but not trust, because that's what Lex needs. He needs it so deeply, because he cannot accept just being loved. That's just Clark is happy that he's alive. That is what propels him down that dark path. And I think that's a fascinating look and character study into the character of Lex Luthor and the character of Clark Kent. That we see the balance between good and evil is much more gray and has many more motivations and reasons for happening than we want to accept. That this is a really well layered writing, well layered philosophy going into the storytelling. That philosophy, that way of thinking, of way of approaching life, is so important and crucial that it made Smallville this mega hit that has still lasted. 20 years later, people are still talking about it, and 20 years from now, people are still going to call it the best origin telling of Smallville, of Clark Kent and Lex Luthor. I'm sure we'll get some great stuff down the line. I hope we do. But so far, the Smallville is the reason people didn't like Man of Steel. Not because Man of Steel didn't have its own strengths, but because Smallville presented such a strong case for how a man could become like Superman. That is the strength of the show. It creates such a strong case. And the Dark Knight trilogy does the same with Batman. It creates such a strong, believable case for why a man would put on a bat suit and make the choices he makes. That Gotham City had to be that bad, and this man had to have these correct little seeds to get him to that place. And so I gotta say, hats off to Al Gough and Miles Millar. Thank you so much, Michael Rosenbaum and Tom Welling. My character too is shaped by watching your performances on that show and the writing. And I am no Clark Kent for sure, and I'm definitely not a Lex Luthor, but I am the gray area. I'm the normal person with the angel and the demon on his shoulders. But when my back is against the wall, I try to do the right thing most of the time, and a lot of that comes from influence from superheroes, not just my family, but from the entertainment I was consuming. I think Smallville was so well written and had such a great concept. I really hope that people continue to watch it, and I hope my analysis and perspective on the character maybe is useful to you in some kind of way. And if it's not, don't worry, you don't have to like this video. You can thumb me down. That's fine with me. But anyway, that's just what I had to say. Highly recommending Talkville. Highly recommending Smallville. There is a lot of Monster of the Week. There's a lot of dated stuff in this show that you may not enjoy. But if you're willing to stick through it, it is on Hulu right now. It is available for sale on Blu-ray and DVD. If you're willing to stick through some of the lamer episodes, you will get so much great mythology. You'll get so many great moments from both Superman and Lex Luthor. And if you watch Talkville, you're going to get a lot of great commentary on these episodes. So I am highly recommending watching them both side by side. I already watched the whole damn show, and I've also watched many episodes of seasons 1 through 3 a lot on repeat, so I don't really need to go back and do that. But I really love that they were willing to do this podcast. I hope they get more guests who are both cast members and crew. I would love to hear from the crew. Any crew member, I would love to hear from the crew. Because I just loved Smallville so much. And I own my favorite seasons. I still need to get the rest of the seasons. 1, 2, 3, and 5 are my favorite seasons. I do love 7, I just haven't gotten it yet. But I would say those are definitely the highest quality seasons of the show. If you want to watch it, I think you'll get the most out of those seasons. And season 7, another favorite. I just didn't own it yet. But definitely check those out. Check out Talkville. Check out Smallville. I think they'll give you a great perspective on the Superman character, and you'll appreciate his journey throughout all of the seasons, because it's a great journey. It's really well told. Just forgive it for being a freak of the week type of thing. It's okay. It's a show. This is what we get. If you get gold out of a show, you just appreciate the gold. All right, that's what we get. So thank you to all you people who made all that shit, because you are phenomenal, and I am happy for those of you having a rough day, and for those of you not having a rough day. I am happy that you woke up this morning. Please be good for no other reason than to be good, and be kind and good to each other, because that's what Superman would do. Or fuck this shit. Tell me how much I suck in the comments, because that's what I don't want to hear. Yeah! Remember, don't like, don't subscribe, and don't comment. Aloha! Thanks for watching.